Hello and welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. I'm your host for today. I'm Jem and I'm here with my friends Alex and Matt. So before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. It is the eve of the long Easter bank holiday weekend at the moment, so I'm feeling a little excitable because 4 days off is always good. And how are you feeling, Matt?
Yeah, good. I've got a day off therapy on Friday.
Ooh.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Have to last over the weekend without going mad.
Well, let's hope you do that. You just shared some really lovely looking Rocky Road or chocolate brownies.
Yeah, chocolate brownies with proper full-size Cadbury's cream eggs baked into them.
See, I like all of that except for the Cadbury's cream egg. So, how about you, Alex? How are you feeling about the weekend ahead?
Looking forward to it, definitely. It'd be nice to have a 4-day weekend and just chill out for a bit, because I think we've reached that stage now where we're all wanting spring to start. So it's that time to launch into spring, hopefully. Yeah.
I have to say, the way the weather was behaving today, it was not looking like spring. It was so wet. So, see, even gamers look out the window occasionally. It interrupts, doesn't it, when it's raining on the window and you're trying to concentrate on whatever game you're playing. So anyway, today we're talking about educational games, and I thought we could just kick off by talking about what educational games means to us. So for me, I've come across educational games mainly as a way to try and encourage my daughter to learn stuff in a fun and interesting way. And if you've got children who don't enjoy homework and aren't happy to just go out and pick up a book, then computer games or board games or card games are really fun way to engage them in learning some of the skills that you want them to pick up. And I think that that's something that's quite easy to find when they're primary school age. But the older that we get, the harder it is to find educational games. And in the whole kind of definition of educational games, we're also going to be talking about the idea of gamification, which is using gaming as a way to encourage people to do things. So sometimes that can be to encourage people to shop in a certain place, or to do workouts regularly, or do regular meditation. So there's all sorts of things where the way that gamification is used. But today I wanted to talk about that in light of education. So if we say educational games includes everything for every age, and also the idea of gamification within perhaps existing systems or existing games. So that's my broad definition of educational games and what we mean and what we're going to be talking about today. And then within that, I'm intrigued to know what you two think about it and what experience you've had of educational games thus far.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have touched on the topic in previous episodes, but I definitely resonate with you talking about there being a lot of educational games for primary school age children, because that's definitely the most of my gaming time, apart from Tomb Raider, was spent playing educational games. ones about maths and English, ones from DK, the DK, they make books and videos. They had a lot of DK videos as well that we used to watch. Things about, like, one about the body and one about, I can't remember what the other one was about, but it'll come back to me. And they also had video games. So there was one, it was like an encyclopedia that flew around the world, and you could, like, click. It was basically a point and click. And when you clicked on stuff, you could find the encyclopedia entry for it, and you could make it speak funny voices, and there was some dice to roll for some reason. But it was just quite interactive and very clickable. And then beyond that, I think there wasn't much in way of games for learning other than, like, through things like BBC Bite Size, when you were, like, revising for exams and stuff, they'd sometimes have little mini games. I particularly remember a couple of really good ones that I found really engaging, that I'd want to play outside of revising because they were quite fun. There was one where you had to basically try and escape from this French airport, and everyone had turned into vampires or zombies or a combination of both, and you had to, like, stealth your way out, but using French to, like, the correct French to escape situations, and everyone would be speaking French, so you'd have to, like, guess the direction from whichever way they said or whatever. So that was quite a tense one, actually. That was really good, and it was quite sort of horror-esque. And then the other one I really enjoyed, I can't remember what topic it was on, but it was basically Egyptian tomb robbing / exploring, and it was all about an archaeologist who got nearly assassinated, and then you had to kind of, like, try and solve the mystery of why. But I can't remember what topic that was directly relating to. If I had to guess, I'd probably say, like, history, but I can't remember it linking. I only clicked on it because it was Egyptology focused, and of course, having gone on to study Egyptology at university, it was like, I'm going to play this game no matter what, And then into adulthood, I suppose you'd get things like the games that I've played, things like Absu and pretty much all of the Assassin's Creeds I'd count as educational, even though they involve a lot of murder. But I'll get onto those in more detail probably later. But yeah, there's definitely an absence of kind of, in that middle period, of there being games marketed directly to teenagers actually on consoles and PCs rather than, like, through educational sites. And that's my experience of it, I would say.
I think languages, which you touched on there with your scary French escape game, I think languages is one of the places where we do see quite a lot of educational games being created, because it's a good opportunity, and it's quite easy, I think, to create games like that where you're encouraged to use and or learn languages. And Duolingo is obviously one of the very popular platforms, and although I would say that Duolingo is more gamification rather than a game itself, it's still kind of drawing from that with the sort of fun little cartoon characters and the competing with friends and working with friends. There's all sorts of layers within Duolingo that make it very interesting to and supportive of a learning environment. And I think it also, you've touched on some of the games that are not necessarily, wouldn't be marketed as being educational, but have a really good educational impact, in that they are well researched and based on facts and based on history. And I think that's really useful as well, so you can enjoy the game and still learn something along the way. And I think that's obviously really there's a big genre, big area really, that you can, a big broad collection of games that fit into that. So thanks, Alex. What about you, Matt? What's your relationship with educational games?
I think, yeah, you're right in that when you're very, very young, there are games that the point of them is you learning, whereas when you get into your early teens and onwards, the games are purely about entertainment, and you can learn things. Learning things is a byproduct of that. So, for example, playing Hellblade or God of War, you can get a glimpse into Norse mythology, and the Assassin's Creed series is probably responsible for a massive portion of young people being interested in the world in general, because there's that classic story of a kid who was on a school tour in Venice, and he could navigate his way through the city because he'd played Assassin's Creed. And just it's tricky to go into this without having to deconstruct the entire educational system of the bloody country. So yeah, most of my learning from games has been just sort of the byproduct of the games I play, rather than being, which is what there's a definite gap in the market what could be, is games where you go into them to learn. You're entertained by them and you enjoy them, but the point of them is that you're learning information or practicing skills. And that's one thing that games are perfect for, is practicing skills. If you can find a way to translate. If I realise whenever I talk holding this pen, I click it. So put that pen away. Yeah, skill practicing, because you can learn how to do any kind of like technical task. You can recreate that in a game engine. And the more sophisticated and accessible, for example, the Unreal Engine is, there is a massive gap in the market for the educational department of the government to go, okay, we're going to invest X amount of money into creating video games that can be used. The point of them is educational tools. But then immediately you go on to, well, that's only for people who have computers or consoles. And even if they've got those things, do they have enough money to get the electricity in their house? And if so, for how long? And do they have good internet? And so there are flaws in it, but again, there's such massive potential with it, and we just need to find a way to unlock it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is definitely an issue with the education system in this country, but I think that's perhaps a much longer conversation to have. And I think that within the boundaries of that situation, we also have to recognise that sometimes these games are just about teaching to the exams and teaching to the tests, and that's not always fun, and it's not always something that people want to do. But sometimes I think that the learning that needs to be done can only be done in a sort of less interesting way, because it's just about learning facts and figures. But I think that using games to sort of secretly teach you is a really interesting way of learning through play, which is effectively what it is. And I think that it would be nice if, when people are designing games, that they were mindful about the fact that you might actually be able to learn something as well. So maybe that isn't the motivation for the game. But making sure that they are factually correct when they're claiming to be historical, or making sure that they factor in some of those elements, it would be a positive impact on the gamers who play those games, and that's obviously got to be a good thing for society. Well, I personally think education is a good thing for society. So yeah, I think that would be good. So do you think that educational games can actually work? I mean, we've sort of touched on it, but do you feel that people are learning, that children do learn from playing educational games? I mean, this isn't a game, but my experience myself was that when I was probably about 6 or 7, maybe even older, my parents were desperately trying to get me and my brother to learn the times tables. And we just did not do it. And so they bought this CD.
Oh my gosh, I think
probably a tape, actually, back in the days, where they just sang the times tables at you.
It was like a rap.
Yeah.
Oh, we must have got the same one. And then I think Carol Vorderman was in it as well, like introducing it or something.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just, and I remember singing the songs. I remember learning to sing the songs. I still didn't learn the times tables. So for me, it was like, I think sometimes these things just don't help. And maybe in some ways they might be distracting, because you're then putting your child or yourself onto a gaming system. And there are many other opportunities and games out there to play. So I know for me, if I sit down to play a game on my phone, an educational game on my phone, I may well end up playing some less educational, less helpful game that I just happen to come across while I'm on it. So what do you think?
I think you can a little, to a certain extent. But like you say, I think there is the danger that the game overtakes and distracts from what information should be being contained in the brain and what is falling out of the brain. It's funny you mentioned those cassettes for times tables. I think they probably were really fun at the time and maybe went in a little bit. But the main way I learned maths, because I had a bit of a dip in my confidence in primary school, we basically did Kumon for the entirety of my secondary school. And then I came out with an A at GCSE. But that's only, I think, because I was doing Kumon outside of school hours with that extra. But that, in a way, was almost gamified, because you had like your homework sheets, task sheets to do every week. And so I'd sort of compete with myself to see if I could get better marks every week, or make sure to do each of my daily task sheets and stuff. But then I was a child who liked rules and also a completionist and a perfectionist, as is my want for like collecting gaming trophies and that kind of thing. It was that kind of cycle where I was like, I need to do this so that I can be 100% perfect, which of course no one can be. But it made me want to do it right. And that's how I got it to stick in my brain, was just learning outside of that school environment. I mean, I probably picked up some inside school, but I needed the extra support outside of it. And that was a way of doing it. And then, of course, you'd meet every week in like the village hall with all the other Kumoners, and kind of do one in the hall with everybody else, and then go and get all your sheets marked and get them marked by somebody while you were there. And then you'd all go home and have your week's worth of the next one. God knows how much it cost my mother, but yeah, it definitely helped. And I think there was definitely some elements of gamification in there, even though it was just pencil and paper, you know.
Was it just maths?
They did also English. They did do English as well. And I think they might do other things now, but it was mainly maths and English that you would go there for. I liked the answer book that came with it. Obviously, I tried not to cheat as much as possible, but it was all nice and shiny and neat and everything. There's something about nice, neat school books that I tended to enjoy. But, yeah, it was interesting. But I think, going back to your actual question, I I think to some extent they can help, but they're not a solution to the challenge that is learning. I think you can't solely learn just through gaming.
And I think maths and languages are one of those things that is really benefited by regular repetition. It's literally you just have to learn it, and the only way you're going to learn it is by practicing it. And so games are a really good way of doing that. And like you say, what you were doing in with your little worksheets and things wasn't necessarily where the learning was happening, but it was probably where the consolidation of that learning was happening in that time between the lessons that you were having at school, where they were teaching you. Then you were using that to sort of back that up, and so that's why a mixed method approach to learning is so useful, and why I think that things like educational games are a really good a side dish really to learning, and a way to kind of keep your hand in. What about you, Matt? What do you think?
I think I'm going to have to deconstruct the education system a little bit, because if you think, well, on a meta basis, what is the purpose of education? So on one half, it is you want a child to work out what they care about and what they're interested in. You also need them to have the life skills to navigate the world. And those are the things that education should be the key focus on. But we don't live in a world where people are safe enough to just pursue the things that they care about. And school doesn't prepare the majority of children for that. We get taught about kings and empires and some wars and all these elements that just they don't help society. They are even learning about extreme things like the Holocaust. It's not taught in the right way. I've been reading recently about. Have either of you heard of the comfort women?
No, I haven't.
So it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's when Japan was building its empire in the 30s and up to the end of World War II, so about 15 years, they would force teenage girls and young women into sex slavery. And these enslaved women were called comfort women, and they were kept in comfort stations, and they were raped over 100 times a day by the Japanese military. And that's one of the most horrifying things I've ever heard of in my life. And I feel like that's the sort of horror that you need to be taught about at some point. The things that are the most horrifying things that humans have done, so that you've got a gauge of the world, and being taught that this stuff happens today. We're taught about all these awful things from the past, but everything's great now. And it just... I was trying to think of a way that games can help shape the global perspective of the person who plays them. And it's really difficult, because then if you use games can be a fantastic resource for people to undertake the task of learning, but then it depends on who is deciding what they're learning. And until we until we sort that out, it's going to be more difficult. But then also you have got the fact that there has never been more information available on the internet and available in so many ways. Like on YouTube, you can Google comfort women and there'll be a dozen documentaries about it. And so the establishment voice that we all grew up with before the internet age, that was the only voice that we were told about. Whereas now, young people have access to literally everything. And it's just enough to know that it's broken, it's not the way it needs to be, but in order to, we don't know what it'll need to be, looks like, and how to get there. But 100% games can be a profoundly powerful tool for education in the right circumstances. But then we don't know what those circumstances are.
No, I think that's a really valid point. We don't know, and so I agree with the point you made right at the start of what you were saying about how education is about helping people to find out how they can be the best version of themselves, to be a little bit fluffy, but there's not really an easy way to say it. But I think it's really important for people to be able to find out how they can contribute to a better, healthier, happier society. And that is not necessarily a clear path. And the best way for people to find that is to explore and have opportunity to try as many different things as possible and to be given as much information as possible so that they can make those choices. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I think, these days we are really lucky in some ways to have access to something like YouTube and the wider internet, which can provide us with information on things that before we might not have been granted access to, let alone able to get it. And I think, the flip side of that is, there are some very unsavory types out there trying to influence people, and there's always a flip side to these things. And I think I generally believe that education, and I mean education with a little e, really. Mm-hmm. Education is really important. I'm very much a believer in the idea that knowledge is power, and the more knowledge and more information we have, the better choices we can make for ourselves and the world and our societies. I think you're right, absolutely, that we've talked a lot about how gaming can transport you into being in different roles, being in different lives, experiencing different things. And I think that's so important. So there's a real, that's the sort of secret education, isn't it, that's happening without you even realizing it when you're playing Assassin's Creed or Baldur's Gate or whatever, Final Fantasy. And, some of it isn't so good. Some of it is, as we've talked about a lot, not so subtle and subtle misogyny, and some of it is awesome socialism that's going on. So there's all of that. Like in any area, you get the good and the bad and the ugly.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.